via bench line, via street line, for modern cunning folk with Peter Pagan. Hello and welcome to The Crooked Path. My name is Peter Pagan, and this week I'm going to be looking at technology and the craft. But first, let's have a look at some news. So, I've been talking about all kinds of fun things with the news, and I just wanted to go over them again because it's always worth repeating. In a mere couple of weeks I'm going to be heading to Chicago, and I'm told my pronunciation of Chicago has improved remarkably from what I used to do. Hopefully that's true. But anyway, the first weekend in September I will be in the Windy City, or reasonably close to it anyway. I'm arriving on Friday evening and having dinner with a bunch of friends, and you won't be able to join us for that, but on Saturday I'm going to be at the Pagan Alliance meeting, and like a complete idiot I have completely forgotten to print out my notes on where you can go and find out about these things, so I will add them to the Facebook pages and the Crooked Path Podbean site afterwards, so that you can find out where to go to get information on the Pagan Alliance gathering on Saturday in the afternoon. In the evening, I believe it starts at 5:30 at Cleo's in Rockford, Illinois. I will be teaching my enchantment class, and I'll also have copies of my books and hopefully some DVDs as well to sell and sign and do other strange, unspeakable things with. And then on the Sunday I will be at Chicagoland Pagan Pride, and once again I'll post the information on how you can find out where exactly that is on the various websites after this. And I will be teaching my Visceral Magic workshop there, and once again I'll have books and DVDs available to purchase and get scribbled on by yours truly. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'll be there with the Pagan podcasters, so there'll be a whole bunch of us. I know Atticus Hobb from Lamplighter Blues is going to be there, and if you haven't heard it, he recently put up an interview with me. For some strange reason he thought I was worth talking to, and so we had a fun hour and a half jabbering away about British folk magic customs, and so you can check that out if you want. And there'll be a bunch of other people. I'm trying to remember who's coming and who isn't. I know Mojo and Sparrow from Canada won't be there this year, unfortunately, which is a real shame because I really like Mojo and Sparrow. The Wiggly and Way is their podcast, and some good pagan music. God, I really can't remember who else is going to be. I know Firelight's going to be there, and Velma Nightshade from Witch's Brouhaha, and Atticus and me, and a bunch of other people. And I will once again post the information specifically on that for you as well on the websites afterwards, which is probably better than spouting off web addresses verbally, because you'll be able to see how it's spelt, which with my strange accent you might not get right. So anyway, that's basically it for the news on that. I am working on some new books, which I'm hoping I'll get out by the end of the year. Specifically, a Visceral Magic workbook to follow on from the Visceral Magic book, and this will be a step-by-step how to get all visceral-like up in your magical life. And I'm going to do a similar book with the enchantment, an enchantment workbook, which is step-by-step training how to become a master of enchantment. It just always seems that masters of enchantment should be Eastern Europeans. So, a master of enchantment. And that's probably a very bad Eastern European accent, so I apologise profusely for any Eastern Europeans listening. and I'm also doing a book on working with the ancestors, which will be primarily from a Welsh Celtic perspective, but there'll be plenty of stuff which is generic witchcraft related in there as well. So hopefully it won't put off the Nordic and Asatruic and Hellenic and any other kind of icks there might be out there. Just because you're not Welsh Celtic doesn't mean you can't use the techniques, or some of them, or most of them anyway. But you know, Welsh Celtic is where I live, so a lot of my examples are going to come from that particular milieu. So if you don't like that tough, I actually, there was a shop that was going to carry my stuff at one point, and the shop owner flicked through my grimoire and saw some references to Celtic deities and said, oh, it's Celtic. Celtic doesn't do well here, we won't buy any after all. And I've refused to sell anything to them ever since, because I get petulant that way sometimes. I thought that was very short-sighted. But anyway, enough of my problems. That's it for the news. Let's get back on the stick and talk about technology and the craft. Now these are two subjects that you don't often see going together unless it's part of a dire warning not to mix them. I myself have been guilty for many years of talking about the dangers of mixing technology with magic. And it's not totally unjustified. I mean, to this day, I am incapable of keeping a wristwatch going, which is why I never wear one. Every time, well, they work fine until I have to change the battery, and that's it, done for. And that doesn't matter whether it's a $2 throwaway watch or a $500 swanky watch. I've never had a $200 swanky watch, let alone a $500 one. And the $35,000 ones, forget it. They won't even let me in the stores where they keep those. So, but I've never had a watch that has survived a battery change. And I'm really bad at remembering to wind up the mechanical ones, even if I could find one in this day and age. So I use my phone for telling the time, because I have no sense of time whatsoever. So I need some sort of chronometer on my person at all times, otherwise I would not know what time of day or night it was, because I have no body clock. Those of you who've been putting up with my podcast for a long time will remember that I destroyed my body clock my last year in Britain by being a full-time student by day. By day he was a mild-mannered media student, but at night he donned the cap and sweater of a security guard. And yes, I worked full-time 12-hour night shifts as a security guard, guarding car dealerships, because they're very important places. And basically you get an idiot in a uniform there to cut down the costs of the insurance. That's basically the main job of a security guard. They don't tell you that. They give you all this thing about patrolling and being important and protecting the cars, and really what you're doing is protecting their payments to the insurance company. And it's very boring work, but it meant that I was sleeping in 15-minute increments between lectures when I could get the chance, and as a result I have no body clock. And on the plus side, I don't get jet lag. On the minus side, if I get bored or my attention wanders, I can fall asleep at the drop of a hat pretty much anywhere. And yes, boys and girls, I have in fact fallen asleep standing in line at Disneyland. So which is really pathetic. It makes boring business meetings very difficult for me. And that's why you won't ever find me in a business meeting without a large cup of Starbucks. Because I need something to stop me from falling asleep in the meeting, because meetings are boring, especially business meetings. But anyway, that's just it's kind of a swerve off left of centre there, but it's vaguely technology related, because it was about why watches are a problem for me. And a lot of people will tell you that you can't use magic around electronics without causing problems, like, so you can't use computers or video cameras or anything like that. And it actually turns out that maybe in the old days when the things were fragile little things, that may have been true. I know that there is magic does have an effect on electronics. But I think modern day electronics are robust enough to deal with that. And I think modern day magicians are tech savvy enough to meet the machines halfway, as it were. Unless you're Harry Dresden and things spectacularly explode around you if you try using technology in his vicinity, I think you're going to be alright. I've certainly discovered that not only is technology perfectly usable within a magical field, it is actually downright beneficial. So I thought I would talk today about technology in the craft, because after all, we are living and crafting and following our spiritual paths in the 21st century. Technology is a big part of our lives, and if you're doing it right, magic should be a big part of your life as well, because it's not something you do at the weekends. It's not a hobby, it's not a pastime, it's not something you do when there's nothing good on TV. Magic is your life path if you're doing it seriously. And so ultimately, sooner or later, you're going to butt up against a circumstance where technology and magic are going to come face to face, if not shake hands and say, "Hi, how are you?" I noticed that you see a lot of tarot readers these days will do tarot readings over Skype. Now that is a great example of technology and magic working well together. And I've done a lot of stuff with technology, somewhat experimentally, I have to admit. I never really knew how well any of it would work, but it turned out it worked pretty well. First of all, here I am doing a podcast on the internet. I've gone from recording on a cheap microphone directly into my computer. I've gone through the gamut of using fancy recording software, fancy recording hardware. At one point I had a 32-channel Mackie mixer, which they cost thousands, and I got it for free because they were updating the stuff where I worked at a certain movie studio. And I got, well, yeah, I don't work there anymore, so I can say it. I worked for Disney until last year, and at one point they were replacing the mixer deck in the recording studio where they do all the voiceover stuff, which happened to be sort of 10 feet away from my desk, and so I happened to be the first person to hear that this deck was going, and so I got it. Now, for those of you who may not be sort of really big and knowledgeable on the world of recording technology, Mackie mixers are the best. I don't know whether everyone else would agree with me, but from my perspective, Mackie mixers are the best. I mean, the major movie studios use Mackie because they are totally noiseless. I could record on that deck and not get a single hiss, a single bit of background noise. It was perfection. And this thing was beautiful, but I was doing a one-person podcast, and by one person I don't just mean one person on air, but I was the engineer and the coffee boy and everything. It was a one-person enterprise, and I had this deck that was the size of a grand piano with 32 channels, and I was using one channel, one single solitary channel, but it was beautiful and clear. And so I eventually sold it to a porn company. So yes, I am responsible for the sound mixing deck that they recorded the soundtrack for Finding Nemo on, and Aladdin, to keep it topical. Robin Williams recorded on that deck, and it's now being used to record grunts and moans and faked orgasms somewhere in Chatsworth. So not my greatest moment, technology speaking, but anyway, what I'm trying to say is I've gone through a whole bunch of stuff. I eventually pared things down to be a lot simpler. I went back to a microphone plugged directly into the computer. It was a nice, good quality condenser mic that had a USB input, so I was able to get very good quality sound doing my podcast. Any problems with the audio was my voice and mostly my mind. And then of course I had this brainwave to actually start doing the podcast as a video thing. So now not only do you have to put up with my voice, you have to put up with my beautiful face. As the old saying goes, I definitely have a face for radio, but you're stuck with seeing it now, so I'm sorry about that, but tough. It's just I figured that when I actually have a guest, which I don't do very often, but I do occasionally do it, or when I have a practical demonstration, actually being able to see is very useful. So, a lot of people are afraid of technology, mostly because they don't understand it. And I'm fairly lucky in that I've had a fairly technical life. I mean, I did science subjects at high school. I worked as a data conversion specialist in England for quite a while. So I've worked a lot with computers and files and technology. And then I did my degree in media, so I learned about filmmaking and video production and all the rest of it. Then I came over here and ended up working at the studios in IT, first of all as a software developer, and then gradually as a project manager and business analyst, looking after web-based applications. So I've got a very technical background. However, a lot of the things that people are afraid of with technology is really silly. I mean, you go and look at a modern day camera. Actually, the latest cameras are very sleek and have very little in the way of buttons on them. But there was a period in the sort of 90s where video cameras, like every available surface, had a button or a dial or something, and you looked at them and you didn't want to touch them because you couldn't pick them up without pressing a button, and you were afraid that something terrible was going to happen or the lens was going to fall off. And I experienced seeing a lot of people having real issues with technology because they were afraid of pressing the wrong button or doing the wrong thing or breaking something or just making a fool of themselves. And I think that's the real key. It's the fear of making a fool of yourself that stops people from doing things. Well, over the years I've discovered that I am a fool anyway, so there's nothing to fear. I'm just being me if I'm making a fool of myself. And the thing with the video camera is, if you ignore all the buttons, what you basically got is a tube that you look through. You look in one end and you see images at the other. And it works perfectly well if you don't bother with any of the buttons except the big red one that says record. In fact, right now what we're doing, I'm not even hitting the big red button that says record on the cameras I've got here, because the record button that's important to us is the one on the laptop, because we're streaming this live through the internet and recording the file to put up later as well. But the real thing about the technology is that it's actually, a lot of people get tied up with the thought of dealing with technology. It's actually very freeing. I've found playing with technology has opened up my magical life a lot, and my life generally, because I get to do crazy things like this, and that really has happened in the magical side of my life as well, because one of the things I've discovered is that technology is actually quite magic friendly if you do it right. For example, a couple of years ago when I was writing the enchantment book, I decided the best way to write the book was to actually teach some workshops on it, so I could try out the ideas that I was putting into the book. And I remember posting on Facebook that I was going to do the enchantment workshops, and I got a bunch of people saying, "Oh, I wish we lived closer," or "I wish you could come here and teach that." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'm already planning to videotape the classes for my own reference. How about after every class I put the recording of the class on a DVD and send it to you, and you get a bunch of people together and you watch it and you try the exercises and you give me feedback." And so we started a Facebook group for the enchantment workshops, and we ended up having groups in several places over the US, also in Australia and the UK and I think Germany, if I remember rightly. And so we were sending out these DVDs. Now I think I was spending about $60 each month on mailing out these DVDs, but it worked. and people got a lot out of it, and then the book got written and everything went on from there. And that made me think, and I thought, well, you know, if I could do this. Now, I knew there was live streaming possible. It was just becoming popular at the time. And I thought, well, if I could find a way to live video stream so I don't have to spend money sending out the DVDs, this could be a fun thing. And I started experimenting with a couple of live streaming options. I tried a couple that were really crap, but they showed me that there was potential there. And then I settled on Ustream at the time. And I ended up getting a paid account with Ustream, which was cool, and it allowed me to set up pay-per-views. And so I was going to try doing some pay-per-views, but my big weakness is marketing, and pay-per-view events really need good marketing. So I haven't actually got round to doing the pay-per-view stuff. I want to teach the workshops that I teach in stores in various locations. I want to do those online so they're more accessible, and doesn't involve me having to find the money to fly somewhere and teach the classes that way. But the really important thing that I realised was that we could actually teach our tradition that way. And so I decided to give it a try. And everyone else was crazy enough to not say, "You're an idiot, stop it," when I suggested it to them. And so we started our training coven about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, thinking that we would just put these classes out, people would watch them on video, and at the end of a year they'd all go their merry way, having perhaps learned something, hopefully, and that would be the end of it. But we discovered something rather special, that when we were doing the practical exercises in the classes, when we did the possessions in the classes, when we did the Sabbats, we live streamed our Sabbats for the long distance students as well. And we discovered this interesting thing, that if you're invested in the process, the energy of the work transmits across the video as well. And not just the live stream, but with the recording. People watching the recordings afterwards will also feel the energy of the working. Now, don't get me wrong, we're not talking about it's like you were physically present. In fact, we've had a couple of our long distance students from England, in fact, get to the point where they came over to visit us for initiation. And also they got to attend classes while they were here as well, because you don't fly over to LA just for a day and go back. They stayed a week, and so they got to take in a class. And each of them agreed that whilst it really is significant that the energy comes across in the video, it's much more obvious when you're physically present. So in other words, video is not a perfect substitute for being there in person, but it's good enough to get by. And so this opens up a lot of opportunities. If you want to do rituals, workings with people who are not local to you, then live streaming, whether you do it the fancy way, like, you know, I've got a 3-camera setup, I do it over YouTube, and it's all very nice. Got a funky little video switcher, and Christopher, my producer here, who plays with the buttons and makes me look not quite as insane as I really am. And but you can do it very simply. 2 or 3 people can get together on Skype and video chat, or you can even use FaceTime if you've all got iPhones, or you can use Google Hangouts and work that way. And if you want to do stuff for the public, like I'm doing this podcast right now, nowadays all you need is 100 subscribers to your channel on YouTube, and you can put on live events. And I'm actually going to teach, hopefully if it gets accepted, I'm submitting a proposal to teach a workshop at PantheaCon in February next year on using live video streaming for teaching. Because I've had a couple of other teachers like Ryan Foxwood and Chris Penzak have said they would like to learn it, and if I taught the class, they would, if I teach it, they will go. So I'm planning on doing that. And pay-per-view is really easy. You set it up, and you set up a PayPal button to pay for it. It's a really great way of extending. If you teach workshops locally, you can take those workshops on the road without having to go on the road, which is really great. If you have people who want to learn your stuff, personal students for your tradition, your coven, your particular way of working, but they're not local. If you're in a hereditary tradition and you have a nephew who wants to learn from you, but he lives in Albuquerque and you're in Los Angeles, this technology is a tool that can be used. And I think a lot of times we shy away from technology because we assume that magic and electronics don't mix, but they really do. If you treat both sides of the equation with respect, they really do work well together. And I think it's important to bear that in mind, that in this day and age where international barriers are breaking down, we're becoming much more a global community, and especially now where there's a lot of movement within the pagan community to you can't really get rid of the secrecy, because some of the reasons for secrecy are integral to the whole process of magic, but there's a level of interaction and dialogue between different traditions and between different teachers and students that can benefit from actually saying, you know what, we've got this technology, let's use it. Conference calls, whether you do it the old school way with any meeting or any of the other tools that are out there for businesses, or you do it on the cheap with Skype and Google Hangouts and YouTube, like I do because I'm a skinflint. It's possible to reach out and communicate in a real and visceral way through the internet, through the medium of electronics and technology. And there's no reason why the old traditional 3.5 miles radius for a coven's territory should matter anymore. If you want to learn from Raven Gramassi, I mean, things have been heading in this direction for 20-30 years now. Correspondence courses, first of all doing it all by mail, where you got a package in the mail and you read it all through, you did your homework, and then you sent your homework back in and then got a report card back. I mean, I ran a correspondence course like that back in the 80s for the Egyptian magic, when I was heavily into Egyptian ceremonial magic. And it was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of work. The advent of the internet and the World Wide Web made that a lot easier. I know Raven Gramassi does correspondence classes for his tradition, and it's all done through email. Chris Penzak does classes through email, and this is really the next step. And I'm hoping that I'm not the only person doing it this way. I know there are people who are doing pre-recorded videos and putting them up on websites and stuff. I'm hoping that the live streaming is not just me, because that would be really sad. But I'm here to say it works really well, and that's why, even though I don't get a lot of people watching the podcast live when I do it on Tuesday nights, I still do it live, because I'm hoping that that will change, that people will become more used to attending events online, live streaming, because there's a level of interaction. If you're watching or listening to this as a recording, if you were actually there on Tuesday night when I was doing it, you could comment in the chat. There's a chat room basically on the YouTube page where you can comment, and if anybody who was listening live to the show were to ask a question in the chat, Christopher would then read it out to me and I'd be able to answer them then and there. It's the next best thing to being live radio or live you know, with a phone-in. I tried doing things with phone-ins. I actually did this podcast on Blog Talk Radio for a while, and stopped doing it because the quality was sucked so badly. I know they've improved the quality now, but now I'm doing it this way. I kind of like doing it this way, but there isn't really an option that lets me do the phone-in side of it particularly easily. Although we are working on that. We are working on Skype options. One of the things I'm going to be doing, hopefully, is to do more interviews with people, because we're now set up so that we can interview people live over Skype video, so that you can see and hear them, I can see and hear them, and it all works well. And we can actually do that with call-ins sometimes. We may occasionally do a call-in night where it'll be first come first serve, because it will be one Skype account, where you can phone in and ask questions and stuff like that, and do a round table or something like that. We can have fun with this, because, you know, why not? Why the hell not? Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling on now. Basically what I wanted to say is that don't discount technology in your crafting. For me, a good indication of how technology can be integrated into areas where you wouldn't expect it to work is Cirque du Soleil. Okay, my wife and I love going to Cirque du Soleil, and we've been to, over the years, we've been to various shows, and until comparatively recently they've all been very people-centric. It's all about the performers doing their incredible things in front of an audience. We went to one, I can't remember the name of it. It was at the Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles, and it was the first one they did, first time they had incorporated multimedia into their show. And I hate to admit this, it was crap. The idea was great, the execution wasn't. They focused so much on the multimedia that they lost the human feel that their shows are so brilliant for. They had a reduced number of acts performing, and it got very repetitive. They were basically doing the same thing over and over again with multimedia overlays. I mean, the technology was brilliant. It was just they focused so much on the technology that it got in the way of the performance. And so we were kind of disappointed. Fast forward to, I guess, 2 years ago, we went to see Iris, which is a Cirque du Soleil show that ran at the Kodak Theatre, as it was called now, the Dolby Theatre, in Hollywood, where they do the Oscars. And it was a tribute to the history of movies, the movie industry. And they incorporated multimedia into that seamlessly. It was perfection. So good, we've seen it, we went back and saw it 3 times. It was that good. And it was a different universe to the first one we saw. It was the technology became part of the performance. And as I said, it was seamless and beautiful. And okay, I'm not trying to claim that I'm the Cirque du Soleil of magical teachers, because I'm not. I'm, you know, the wrong shape for, well, unless I could play one of the clowns, I guess. And perhaps I sound like them sometimes. Who knows? But I like to think that when I do my stuff, the technology is a tool that complements what we're doing rather than something that gets in the way of or obscures what we're doing. At least it seems to work pretty well that way for me. So all I'm saying is that whatever you do, if you have friends in extended around the world in any way, even if it's just in the next town, and you're finding it difficult to get together to do stuff, then try using the technology to bridge that gap and see what it does for you. The thing about technology is it doesn't bite. Okay, if you stick your finger in the power socket, that could hurt. And you could trip over a few cables if you're not careful. But ultimately, if you try it and it doesn't work, what have you lost? You may find that it enhances what you do because it gives you the freedom to work with people that you wouldn't be able to work with otherwise. It gives you the freedom to share and have dialogue. Even if it's just using the technology to talk about stuff, it's giving you something you didn't have before. And these days you can do it mostly free. I mean, YouTube doesn't cost anything. They get their revenue from the ads that they play up alongside your videos and stuff. And yeah, the equipment can be expensive, but you don't have to go completely crazy. I did a Kickstarter and got my nice little video mixer that cost about $2 grand. But my cameras, they're high def cameras, although I'm broadcasting in standard def. But the cameras are high def. They're Canon ZAC-T cameras, and they cost between $200 and $300 each. They're not expensive. The the laptops that we're using are not horrendously expensive. You've probably already got a laptop that will do the job. Having good bandwidth for live streaming is probably your biggest expense. I'm a crazy technical guy. I had the bandwidth anyway because of all the web stuff I do and the publishing and what have you. So it wasn't a big deal for me. But you can, I mean, nowadays in selected towns, Time Warner is giving people 100 megabits per second. They're about to increase it in LA to 300 megabits per second, which I'm very excited about. Actually, not so much the 300 megabits because that's download speed, it's that increasing the upload speed to 20. At the moment it's about 5, which means I'll be able to broadcast the live streaming at more than 1 bit rate, which means I can do this one, which is reasonably good quality, and I can do a lower quality one for the people who have slower setups, or perhaps watching it on their phones and stuff like that. And so I'm really excited about the possibility of actually upping the ante on my technology. And ultimately I just like playing with toys, whether they're the magical toys or they're the technology toys. It's all the same to me. It's all really magical and it all enhances my life. So give it a try, give it a play, and don't be afraid to press those buttons, because the worst thing you're going to do is erase something and have to start again. And sometimes that could be a good thing. So that's it for this week. Hope you've enjoyed my strange little side journey into the world of technology. If not, I'll be talking about something different next week, so join us again. Have fun. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
By a bent line, by a straight line, by a crooked line. The Crooked Path, a podcast for modern cunning folk with Pagan.